Hey, is this working? Um, I wanted to make this video. I'm not entirely sure if I should make it even, but I feel like I should, perhaps, because I want to talk about the symptoms of Kundalini awakening through the light of Mario games. I guess. What's that? So, the issue here would be that the Mario games, I feel, have some connection with the imagery of the chakra system, which basically, I guess, is another way of saying with the body and the way that the body, well, the relationships, I guess, between mind and matter. And I've been focusing on this very purely in terms of like concepts recently in some of the videos, but I feel that it might be good or interesting to think of the actual chakric system because I've been very interested in that. I guess all my life, but I very rarely mention it in the videos. So I feel it's sort of a little bit dishonest in the sense that I do think that these things have a connection to Mario games. So I'd rather talk about why instead of just bringing it up with no reason. So the thing is basically that I think that the uh, body seems to be divided into these sections that are detailed in like yoga, for example, right? I'm that's the sort of yogic traditions are the kind of language that I'm most used to hearing about this and studying it. But yeah, so that's what I'm going to be using. But basically, I'm just talking about the way in which there seem to be correspondences between the chest area and certain, I don't know, ways of feeling or something. And that seems to express itself in Mario games. Okay, why? Right, that's pretty stupid, but I want to try and look at it. So, for example, I'm sort of intrigued by the way in which the chest area is a good place to start. For example, the chest area seems to be associated to the heart, and in a lot of ways, a kind of connecting to emotions and being able to feel emotions. Emotions is something that has to do with perhaps relationship between you and other things, and what you feel towards those other things, and so forth. And that connection then seems to acquire kind of like a balance between the upper parts of the body and the lower parts of the body. So, for example, if there's a lot of tension in the lower parts of the body, or there's a lot of tension in the head and the upper parts of the body, it seems to exist in balance to the chest area. And the chest area acts as some sort of a bridge between those two parts. And just there, that sort of triple division of the body that I see into like top part, head, middle part, and then bottom part seems to be something that I'm interested in these games. And it seems to be something that I keep finding in these games. Obviously, the question as to whether this is a projection or not is, I guess, at some level, not for me to say, I guess, or open in some way, because I think, so I guess what I'm exploring in these videos is the possibility that the body might be affecting us more than we think, in ways that we don't usually consider, in, like, I guess, specifically in capitalist society. I know capitalist society doesn't mean much maybe nowadays. It's maybe very extended, but I mean more in the sense that I think there is some sort of way of thinking. Well, let's not call it a way of thinking. Hard to explain. Well, let's say I claim it's a way of thinking. Obviously, that's impossible to learn, but I claim that there is some sort of way of thinking that comes from prioritizing private gain, right? In a sense, the Buddha speaks of this. So in a sense, you can speak of it in terms that don't necessarily need to relate to systems of capitalism as a word. But let's say that, I guess, in systems where personal gain seems to be the focus, and everything in society kind of focuses on that, then okay, just a second. My computer. Okay, so in those cases, microphone working, something happens, I think, to the body. The body becomes a place, perhaps, that's very focused on fear of losing, fear of not gaining, right? And perhaps the great sort of, again, in Buddhist terms, the great attachment to winning certain things. Well, just attachment in general kind of seems to affect the body somehow. I think the way it affects the body in some case is that it, this is just my sort of personal perspective on this, based on what I've learned of Buddhism, is simply that attachment precisely is attachment to specifics, and specifics very rarely occur. So, for example, if you want to be in a specific mood, maybe eating some chocolate will put you in that mood. But at some level, it really isn't always the same mood. Your mood will change. So there is some sort of an attachment to... Attachment itself means attachment to, like, specific states of being. And specific states of being don't seem to be very compatible with being, I guess. Okay. I'm getting lost. It's okay. It's okay. Let's drill down this issue of attachment, perhaps. So attachment has something to do, I think, with the way in which you focus on specifics. And specifics are so interconnected to all other things that they stop being specific, really, at some level. Like, having that specific mood that you want, having it now, or having it now, or having it now. Now always, implies a bunch of other stuff, like all sorts of temperatures and changes in your mind and in your body. And so if some of those states are associated to winning and some are associated to losing, it ends up being a bit of a problem, basically. Because winning and losing are like too specific. You can attain them sometimes, right? You can attain winning and losing in the sense of what I want, I will get. But this thing that you want and you get is always different from what you want and what you get at some level. So I guess it's to the extent that you are concerned with the imperfection of the moment that you're getting, it seems to perhaps cause a rejection of the moment. You're like, nope, please. I don't want to be feeling that. If you don't want to be feeling that, it's very likely also that you end up really disconnecting yourself from what you're feeling. You just zone out, right? In fact, eating chocolate and so on are very often good ways of disconnecting from the body. Not entirely, but there is some way in which we can use them like that. Addiction in general. And addiction is a good metaphor, I suppose, for winning and losing, because it's you want a specific state of mind and you don't want this other state. And there is a specific state that you will repeatedly get. You repeatedly seek somehow, right? So I'm explaining this, I guess, to explain the fact of the disconnection from the body. I feel that it's easy to have some sort of a disconnection from the body because you're avoiding feeling a bunch of things that you kind of would try not to feel. You're trying not to feel. And so somehow it seems like we're kind of successful at that. We do manage to disconnect from the body at some level pretty well. To the point where you kind of can't even feel specific, like, again, gut feelings that you get that maybe you discover later. Maybe later you discover that in hindsight, back then, you were already feeling a certain fear towards a certain thing, and yet you weren't fully aware of it, right? And then we realize, now I know that I wasn't even wanting that. I wasn't wanting the thing that was happening, and yet I didn't allow myself to even become aware of that fact. In things like in peer pressure, for example, or making a fool of yourself in order to please others. That, I think in a lot of cases, the residue of that, again, and this enters into like psychotherapy stuff, I suppose, is that if there was something that happened that you didn't want to happen, and actually you wish you would have said no. There was some sort of a no that was stored in your body, but it's kept stored there. And it didn't come out then. But we tend to leak it out in other situations. So there will be a stored anger that will come out in other moments. And yet that anger nothing to do with that moment in which you decided to let it come out, or you had little control of it even. So there are no's that don't come out at certain moments. We're not able to let them out, and so on. So then that feeling perhaps that you maybe felt, a gut feeling or a tingly feeling, that's a feeling that was trying to tell you no no to this. We're very able to disguise that feeling and try not to feel it because, oops, if you felt it, that would really be terrible. It would disrupt a bunch of shit that maybe you are very scared to disrupt. And, well, that maybe you're really trying not to disrupt. Anyway, general theories about trauma and stress and things like that I think are pretty prevalent in our society. I do link it to capitalism personally, in the sense that capitalism is just a comfy word to use for this. The sense that, but I do think that there is something to that word. The prioritization of private gain over public gain, over sharing in some way, right? Private gain and public gain, I think, go hand in hand. They connect to one another, but I think there is a prioritization of private gain currently, which will prioritize, again, this feeling of I must win, I must get what I want. Because getting what you want, getting your private gain, becomes like the essential ingredient, the big thing that you could do at different levels. Yeah, at all different levels in your life, I suppose. So, when do we start talking about Mario? Mario games, I feel like I perceive themes of this sort in Mario games. And that's kind of what I'm interested in talking about in this channel. The reason I perceive those things in the games, that's a good maybe thing to talk about. The reason why I perceive them, well, there's different ways we can maybe approach this. I'll try okay, what do we want to say here? I feel like these themes are in the games. But what does it mean that these themes are in the games, right? Those, I think, maybe are questions that are completely outside my scope. Really. At some moment. At this moment. That's completely outside of the scope. What I'm interested in mostly is that there seem to be traditions that have focusing on the body, and meditation and stuff is one of those traditions. And so a lot of traditions associated to meditative practices of different kinds. And so generally I would say that religions and spiritual traditions end up being associated to these sorts of movements, end up kind of developing big theories and specific systemizations of different little bodily reactions that seem to be associated to meditative practice. I think because, well, one reason why that could be is simply because, again, there is a way in which, as you relax the body, you retrieve some of that response to the body. You become a little more connected to the no in your body, or to the even the different kinds of yes that you'd forgotten, things that you wanted to do that you'd completely prevented yourself from doing, and so on. All these things you prevented yourself from doing come flooding back, I think, in meditative practice. And so there seems to be the systemization of the different ways in which these things come flooding back. And the way these things come flooding back, in a lot of cases, seems to be through feelings, sensations connected to the body. Gut feelings, chest feelings, head feelings, groin feelings, feet feelings, arm feelings, hand feelings, and so on, right? A lot of guided meditation stuff, for example, often focus on these exercises that relax the body by parts. Like they'll say, relax your wrists, relax your chest, relax your feet, or whatever. I mean, yeah. And so there is, I think, in these practices, a focus on the body. And the body as felt in a way that perhaps you hadn't really felt it until now. And one of the systemizations that exist of this is the idea of Kundalini, right? As I said, the yogic idea, I think, of an energy that seems to connect all of the chakras of the body into one unit of some kind. And that kind of associates different parts of the body to different meanings to a lesser or greater extent. And so the top of the head gets associated to things like the intellect. Again, the heart gets associated to things like relationship, and the groin or the lower belly get associated to sex and other kinds of like desires, physical sort of desires. And at some level, there's something about this that I think is important or interesting to focus on, because we are connected to our bodies at all times. You know, even when we're not really, even if we don't have like the specific language or something to talk about it, which is why perhaps this stuff is, well, okay, what do we want to say about it? This video is so slow, but it's fine. What exactly, like, what do we want? What are we saying? What are we saying about this at this point? What are we saying about it? There seems to be, I think, an important sort of human experience, I would claim. The experience of feeling your body in different ways, and feeling the ways in which your body is relating to the world, right? It's feeling things that you may be feeling and not be fully aware of. I think that something about that I feel helps us somehow, like to be aware of how the body is feeling helps us sometimes, because it allows us to relate to the world in a slightly better way. Better meaning that if there's something that you would want to say yes to, you can, if you're able to feel that desire, then it's easier for it to not shoot off in directions that you don't expect. I think that when desires shoot off in directions you don't expect, like again, when you really wanted to get angry at a specific situation or person who said something to you or did something, you would have liked to have a strong kind of no at that moment, and yet it comes off in a different direction. That different direction probably didn't deserve that no. You know, you ended up, it's like the typical story of you don't get angry at your boss, but you get angry at your partner or something. Sort of stories like that, you know. I think that because of that, if you end up getting angry at people that you really didn't have any meaning to get angry for, it can cause a lot of ruckus and chaos, and can develop into a lot of unethical behavior, right? Because even if it's, even if you say it's conscious or unconscious or whatever description you may give it, at some level, you are sort of not being very responsive, I guess, right? Because there is something in you that's not really responding correctly to the situations. And again, correctly here, I specifically mean in terms of knowing what you're feeling, right? And maybe at some time you want to say no, maybe at some other time you want to say yes, but if you're aware of when you want to say no and when you want to say yes, when you want to abstain, when you want to join, when you want to go, when you want to stay, and so on, etc., you can join and stay and do all these things in the appropriate way, so to speak, in a way that doesn't doesn't become unpolitical or something, It doesn't become problematic, perhaps. So being in contact with the body is good, but of course being in the contact with the body is difficult, because many times there are all sorts of things happening down there that you don't really want to be in contact with. Because especially if you think that there are things you want and things that you don't want, and you want to get the things you want and you don't want to get the things you don't want, if that's very prioritized in you, it'll be maybe more difficult to, for example, do things you don't want to do. And doing things that you don't want to do at some level seems to just be in an inevitability. Right? Anyway, so stuff about that. Let's talk about that for a while. Why not? So I've talked about that for a second. The question then is, why does this appear in art? Let's say artistic expressions or Mario games in this case. Well, it am I ready to talk about this now? Maybe, yes. I think the issue here is that if we're always feeling this, if it's always within us, if we're always feeling whatever we're feeling, it's very likely that we're going to become sort of aware of it through some other means.